Okay, so I'll just jump right into it. To start off with some background information, when pullet-laying hens are moved into non-cage or aviary type systems, they're expected to reach elevated tier heights sometimes as high as 400 centimeters high, where they are provided with essential resources such as food or water. There is no fundamental research in what the most appropriate way is for these birds to reach these elevated tier heights. Perhaps the installation of ramps will provide these birds with a safe way to maneuver between tiers and prevent falls and injuries. In general, there is a huge lack of knowledge when it comes to the rearing of chicks. Perhaps housing the chicks in the same system will allow the birds to gain the cognitive abilities necessary. In general, there's they're ground birds that we're talking about. They have limited flight abilities, massive hind limbs, and easily exhaustible wing muscles. My first paper that I just submitted was titled The Development of Locomotion Over Inclined Surfaces in Laying Hens. And what we found was that chicks and adult fowl performed walking behavior to climb 40-degree inclines. They did not need the assistance of their wings until the inclines got steeper, from 50 to 70 degrees, where they performed wing-assisted incline running, or aerial ascent, so jumping while flapping. In addition, we found that wire grid surface ramps were very important. They needed the hind limb traction. As you can see in the right photo, the bird just was using her hind limbs, and in the left photo, these types of studies have been done in wild birds, in pheasants, but this was the first study done in the domestic chicken. And so if the birds are using different styles of locomotion on these different ramp inclines, we wanted to know, how do these laying hens anticipate ramp inclines? If the birds anticipate them differently, do they also prepare differently in the transitions to climbing? So we use our visual sense of looking for a sensory input, and then we have brain integration and a motor output from the muscles in our hind limbs. Let me give you an example. As you can see in my left photo, when we're driving our car and we approach a traffic light, we have to anticipate that the light will turn red and we have to press on the brakes. Similar, in the right photo, if a bird is approaching an uneven surface or an inclined surface, they have to anticipate the steepness of the incline and they have to push off from the ground and propel themselves. So there's a sensory input and a motor output. So the goal of my second study was to measure the motor responses from the hind limbs to provide information about how the motor system responds to these sensory stimuli, such as inclined surfaces. In humans, they adapt to inclined surfaces with a unique anticipatory step during the transition, as you can see in the figure below. They produce higher vertical ground reaction forces as inclines get steeper. So in my study, we placed the force plate, the BirdTech custom-made force plate, just prior to each ramp incline. We used 20 birds aged 17 to 36 weeks of age, and we measured them on inclines of 0, 40, and 70 degrees, so 0 being a flat surface. And we also only used wire grid ramp surfaces because in my first study it was shown that they had much more success rates and better hind limb traction. Our hypotheses were that they would have higher peak vertical ground reaction forces for steeper ramps, and that they would have more force plate contact time with steeper ramps to allow for more sensory processing on a more challenging task. And so this is just a graph from my manuscript, and what we found was that for the 0 and 40 degrees on the x-axis for all age groups, there were no differences in the vertical ground reaction forces relative to their body weight, but this increased significantly for the 70-degree incline. And in the first highlighted row here, you can see the bold numbers represent a significant difference, and for the 0 and 40 degrees, there was no differences in the vertical ground reaction force relative to body weight, and then there was for the 70 degrees. But then for the contact time in the second highlighted line, you can see that as the inclines got steeper, they needed more sensory processing time. So for a take-home message, what we found was that birds require more time for sensory processing or decision-making depending on the incline, the challenge of the incline before them. So they didn't need to produce higher ground reaction forces for a 40-degree incline compared to 0, but they did need more sensory processing time for a steeper incline. So the modulation or adjustment of ground reaction force was only required for the steepest incline of 70 degrees. And in aviaries, we recommend for adult fowl to have incline angles of 40 degrees or less. Thank you to my funders and to George Ansoff for providing the decal white birds. And I have a video to close if we have time while we get next for the next presenter. Oops. Oh, okay.
I might have to play it.
It's just really quick. So it's kind of hard to see, but there's a square before the incline. That's the force plate. This is a 70-degree incline, if it works. Okay. That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much.